Okay, now I'd like to introduce the panelists. And we have a very distinguished group of panelists here. And as I call your name, I'd like you to raise your hand so everybody can see who you are. So first, Lyle Rawlings. Lyle is president. And wait till you hear what I have to say about it. Lyle is president and CEO of Advanced Solar Products, a regional solar energy developer, designer, and builder, and is the co-founder and president of the Mid-Atlantic Solar Energy Industry Association, the solar business trade organization for New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. He's a licensed professional engineer, and he has 3 patents in solar technology. The New York Times Magazine called him the founding father of renewable energy legislation in New Jersey. Okay, so. Okay, now next is Jim Walsh. Jim? Jim Walsh currently serves as the Renewable Energy Policy Analyst for Food and Water Watch, where he was previously the Mid-Atlantic Region Director. He started a career focused on social and economic justice with the Milwaukee Catholic Workers while earning a degree in economics at Marquette University. He's also worked with the New Jersey Public Interest Research Group, Family Promise, and New Jersey Citizen Action. He has also been involved in helping to improve the community wherever he lives, volunteering and serving on numerous boards and as a council person in Highland Park. Okay, next. Next is Dan Fatton. Dan is Executive Director of the Work Environment Council, an alliance of 70 labor, community, and environmental organizations dedicated to safe, secure jobs and a healthy, sustainable environment. Dan is also co-founder of Jersey Renews, a coalition of New Jersey organizations pushing for state-based action on climate change. He's also chair of the City of Trenton's Planning Board and serves on several boards, including the New Jersey Climate Adaptation Alliance and New Jersey Policy Perspective. Richard Lawton. Richard is Executive Director of the New Jersey Sustainable Business Council, which aims to achieve economic development compatible with shared prosperity and environmental stewardship. He worked as an executive with Time Inc., Barnes & Noble, and Comag Marketing Group, and was recognized by Folio magazine as a top 40 influencer and innovator for his work making the magazine's supply chain more efficient and profitable with lower environmental impact. And finally, Dr. Guran, who you've already seen in the video. Dr. Guran is the director of the Rutgers EcoComplex, Clean Energy Innovation Center, and manages Rutgers' new EcoIgnite Clean Energy Proof of Concept Center and Accelerator Program. She promotes the integration of clean energy and clean technology education and entrepreneurship. Her teaching includes courses on sustainability decision tools, bioenergy technologies, the food, energy, water nexus. Currently, she is working on promoting integration of organic waste into a closed-loop bioeconomy. Okay, and the moderator for our panel is Dawn Clarke. We are fortunate that Dawn is a member of the local Union Area League and a trained League of Women Voters moderator. Actually, more than that, she's also a trainer for moderators, and she's League Vice President for Voter Service. Okay, so let me remind you again, if you're not registered to vote, or if you want to vote by mail, materials are outside and you can pick them up as you leave. The format tonight will be that first, the panelists will each make a 5-minute statement. Then they'll respond to prepared questions from the moderator, Dawn Clarke. And finally, we'll take audience questions. To ask a question, write it on an index card, which I hope you picked up as you came in. And then students, when we get to the third question, students will be walking up and down the aisles looking for index cards to bring forward, and we'll supply some of them to Dawn to ask the panelists. Okay, let's begin. Dawn?
Okay. Like the students, I think we all want to say how pleased we are that you're here, because this is an important issue. I particularly want to say thank you to our panelists who are giving of their time. I can't help but notice that they all not only work, but they all volunteer. And isn't that important, where we help and serve each other? And it's an important part of their whole thing. Okay. I'm glad you have been clapping, but I would like to take some prerogatives here. We have a lot of information, and this should be a good informational meeting, so I'm going to ask you now not to applaud after each of the speakers, if you don't mind, and then we can move on and hear from each of them. I'm going to ask each of these panelists to give you a short 5-minute or under, if you can get away with it, discussion. And I think we're just going to go, and we're going to start with you, Mr. Walsh. If you could give us your initial ideas on what's important.
Thank you very much to the League of Women Voters. Hello? Is that better? Yes. Thank you very much to League of Women Voters for pulling this panel together, Westfield for hosting us, particularly students who put this event together. I can tell you that all of us are counting on your generation to carry us through, and the amazing work that you've been doing building social movements around the country really needs to be recognized. So thank you for that. The youth are really coming forward strong. Food and Water Watch supports a plan to transition the United States to 100% renewable energy by 2035, using solar, wind, geothermal, and tidal sources exclusively. We also think that we need to take steps to transition our transportation infrastructure, along with home heating oil and cooking, to renewable energy sources as well, and not just our electric sector. Now, these goals didn't come out of nowhere. They're based on the International Panel on Climate Change analysis of what we need to do to have a 2/3 chance of avoiding a 1.5 degree Celsius increase in global temperatures. This is the level of that the Paris Agreement also strives to get us to. The current Paris Agreement is estimated, with the commitments we have right now, will only limit us to somewhere above 3 degrees Celsius increase in global temperature. With 1 degree increase since the beginning of the 1900s, we've seen a tremendous growth in extreme weather that's been linked to climate change. We all here in this crowd were, I'm sure, familiar with Hurricane Sandy, but the impacts of climate change go well beyond that, into wildfires, droughts, floods, heat waves, and even the cold weather spell that we've recently experienced has been linked to global warming. We're approaching various tipping points, and these tipping points will come about between 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius. Scientists have identified about 18 different climate tipping points. And when I say climate tipping points, these are unpredictable and irreversible ways to that will change our planet, and that we can't go back from. While these major things are going on, the legislature in the state is figuring out ways to give away $300 million a year to the nuclear industry with massive unnecessary subsidies to a profitable industry, and passing an energy bill that goes about halfway up the field. The energy bill that recently passed, and some of the speakers here may speak favorably of it, we're very concerned with the bill because when it will continue to allow fossil fuels to exist in the state. On the same day that this bill passed the legislature, announcements hit the paper about a power plant in the Meadowlands that will be a major source of energy for New York City and burning gas. And New Jersey right now is currently a net exporter of energy and will continue to be so until we actually take steps to shut down fossil fuel development in the state, stop the pipelines from being constructed, the continuation of power plants, and relying on combustion for an energy source. Now, we're up against tremendous opposition that is pushing for these policies, but that's not a reason that we should mute our expectations or think that we should be shooting for anything less than we need to have a planet that we can live on. We should be working to build coalitions across traditional boundaries. Dan is here from the Work Environment Council, which is doing an amazing job building dialogue between labor and environmental organizations. Both of us have worked with the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance to address the concerns and issues of environmental justice communities in the state. There need to be coalitions between the suburban and rural communities that are fighting pipelines and the urban communities that are fighting power plants that are making people sick. And New Jersey, we actually have some really tremendous opportunities to move forward in changing our energy future. And one of those areas that I would like folks to think about in organizing is working at the local level. People say, well, the president is sending us back for renewable energy and taking steps back. The reality is the decisions about energy usage are mainly driven by the states, and there's a lot of power at the local level to actually address energy. In New Jersey, municipalities have the ability to enact ordinances that would make them government energy aggregates. And what this is it essentially says that the municipality can purchase and negotiate energy or even generate energy for their residents from renewable sources. Or they can get them from fossil fuels if they want, but they can use this as an opportunity to actually take control of their energy future and actually find ways to reduce energy usage and reduce fossil fuel usage for residents, and turn, despite the fact that the state is only going to 50%, the country is, a pittance of that, municipalities themselves can make a commitment to go to 100% renewable energy. That's happening in municipalities. There's over 100 municipalities in the country right now who've made that commitment. There's not one in New Jersey who's made that commitment, and we can start doing that here today in Westfield and other communities across the state to transition our municipal and county governments to 100% renewable energy. And by doing that, we'll actually be making concrete changes while building the political power we need to transition our state and federal government to 100% renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. May we hear from you, Mr. Rawlings, now?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the student activists and volunteers and organizers of this event. You guys are so awesome and so adorable. I want to take you home with me, but I don't think they'll fit in my Prius, but my next car will be an electric car, by the way. That's the way to go. And there's lots more we could say about electric vehicles, but my shtick is solar energy. As Nancy said, I head up the Solar Energy Industries Association for a 3-state region, and so I get hip deep in the legislation and the regulations that enable that to happen. And New Jersey has been an absolute leader in the country. We've done lots and lots of solar on a per capita basis. We're still a leader, although we've fallen behind in the last few years. But what my company does is we develop and design and build these projects. We do it on a large scale, like really big rooftops or solar farms. So a typical project for us, the size might be about 1 megawatt. That's about 3,000 solar panels, each one of them about 6.5 feet by 3 feet. We'll put those on a roof or on the ground. 1 megawatt will take up about 4 acres of property. One of those projects will take us about 2 years to develop, and then once we get it all permitted and developed and financed, it'll take our engineers and our workers about 4 or 5 months to build this thing. Well, New Jersey has built the equivalent of about 2,500 of 1 megawatt solar power plants, and that's a lot of work. And the solar industry, as I said, had experienced a downturn over the last few years, but we were still going along along at a pretty good clip, about 10,000 people employed by the companies in my industry association. That's a lot of people working in this state, a lot of families being supported. Solar installer is the fastest growing job description in America and has been for 4 years. But we were approaching a cliff. Solar energy was about to come to a screeching halt, and the industry association and other solar leaders were working on a bill for the last year. And something remarkable happened last Thursday. It was pretty amazing. The bill that we've been working on for a year, working and slaving away and getting legislators behind it, it actually came up for a vote and passed in the legislature in January, then was pocket vetoed by Governor Christie. A week later, it was reintroduced into the legislature, but it ran into some big trouble. We thought it was just going to sail through, and it just ran into a brick wall. Part of it was the fact that at the same time this nuclear subsidy bill came up, there was a lot of opposition to that and a lot of concern about the cost of this nuclear subsidy. And when the spotlight started to turn to cost, it fell on the solar community too. And we started coming under that same spotlight. What is the cost we're paying for solar in this state? And we ended up not looking good. Unfortunately, government made some bad choices in terms of how they were incentivizing solar. Turned out it was not a very efficient way to go, and we were paying 5 or 6 times more for every kilowatt hour of solar than neighboring states like New York were paying. So some mistakes were made, and we built up a big overhead of cost. And when the light shone on that, when people started focusing on cost, we didn't look good, and it became a problem for us. So the bill that we were carefully preparing for about a year got cut down and cut down. We fought back like crazy. It was a big battle at the same time that the battle was going on over this nuclear bill. And we made it with a bill that was cut down compared to what we had hoped for, but it was livable. We will start accelerating the construction of solar energy, but the week before last week, when it went through committee hearings in the Assembly and the Senate, Senator Bob Smith, who's our great champion of solar energy in the state, came up to me during the hearing, and some other solar leaders were there, and he said, "You guys were this close to dying." And he said, "It's okay now, it's going to pass, but you guys were this close to dying." That's how serious the cost concern had become. So, when the bill passed last Thursday, it was amazing. It sailed through the Assembly, and then I was in the Senate chambers when it was being voted. And after all this work, all this fighting and everything, it came up for a vote. They introduced the bill, and it was voted and done in 40 seconds. It was amazing. So I was there like stunned. But the funny thing is, us solar advocates, we weren't high-fiving each other, we weren't smiling, there was a lot of drawn faces because the fight had been so tough that we were just shell-shocked. And so it didn't hit me until the weekend, and I started thinking about this bill. Something really remarkable happened last Thursday, because this bill is a real turnaround for this state in terms of commitment to clean energy and renewable energy. And few places in the entire world have made a commitment like this. It was a commitment to accelerate the construction of solar energy as a commitment to 50% renewable energy by 2030. Now, I know that Food and Water Watch is pushing for more, but in the context of what's happening in this country and around the world, that is a remarkable goal. It made a huge commitment to offshore wind. It made a commitment to electric vehicles. It made a commitment to energy efficiency. It made a big requirement for constructing storage by 2021 and more by 2030. So it's a tremendous tremendous amount of really innovative stuff in this bill that the new governor, Governor Murphy, has done in just less than 4 months in office, 3 months in office, really. It's a tremendous turnaround from where we were. And when I realized that, I was just stunned. I said, you know, I should be out there celebrating, because it is really a remarkable turn of events for New Jersey. But there is a cautionary note. The cost of the inefficient way we've been incentivizing solar for the last 15 years is going to be hanging over us as a big cost for at least the next 10 years. In the year 2020, it's going to reach about $750 million, just for the legacy of the projects that we already committed to. And if responsive to this 50% goal, we start a new solar program, even though it will be much lower cost and much more efficient, that's going to add to that overhang. And so one other thing the bill did was a 9% limit of the total that we can spend on renewable energy. Now, I would agree with Food and Water Watch that we can afford to spend more than 9% increase in our power costs to get this renewable energy, but we also have to think about the consumers and what they think. They could push back, and in the solar industry we have a saying, pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. You push too far, there could be pushback and we could lose the gains that we have made. So we have to balance the cost to consumers for how much we do and how fast we do it, with that urgent need to fight climate change. And we're going to be forced to strike a balance. We can't dictate the terms and expect that both the opponents and those who safeguard consumer costs are not going to push back.
That's what we have to think about. That's good information. I'd like to move on to you, Mr. Lawton.
Great, thank you. I'd also like to thank all of our hosts and also the fellow panelists in talking about such an important issue. What I'd like to do is actually start with a little audience of participation. And I can't really see everybody very well, but I've got a question for you. It's a multiple choice question. Are you ready? All right. The question is, when considering our current economic system, which of the following business philosophies would you say most accurately reflects how most companies operate? So show of hands, well, I'll read both options first, and each one of these is a statement, then a quote. So the first option is A. There is one and only one social responsibility of business: to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits, so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say, engages in open and free competition without deception or fraud. So that's the first description. B is, there's no more strategic issue for a company or any organization than its ultimate purpose. For those who think business exists to make a profit, I suggest they think again. Business makes a profit to exist. Surely it must exist for some higher, nobler purpose than that. So show of hands, these are two different philosophies, but which, A or B, who thinks that A best describes our current economic system, how it currently functions? Okay.
That's quite a lot.
Quite a bit, okay. Who thinks that the quote I read, option B, best describes how our current economic system functions? I don't see any hands.
I don't see any hands.
Yeah, look. Okay, maybe one? Okay. Almost, if not unanimous, and almost unanimous for A. A wins that one. Let me just, reframe the question a little bit. In your personal opinion, which philosophy more closely aligns with what you feel would be best for business in terms of a guiding philosophy? A? Can I hear for A? How about B?
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it?
So this highlights, not that this is a representative sample necessarily, but still I think it's instructive, highlights a difference in terms of what I think is very important. The first you may have recognized this quote from Milton Friedman. He was the economics professor at the University of Chicago. The second was a quote from Ray Anderson. Ray Anderson was the CEO of Interface Carpeting. Ray's interesting. He was I'd say one of the pioneers in sustainable business. He described kind of what he called like a conversion experience after he read Paul Hawken's book, The Ecology of Commerce. And that led him to embark on a dramatic re-engineering of his company to make it more sustainable, but also help lead a sustainable business movement as well. The first choice, I think, kind of can be described as kind of a shareholder-centric view of business. And as you notice that talk about its pursuit of profit as an end in itself, as long as you do so in ways that are according to the rules or within the laws. The second, and those are kind of like, I would say, kind of firm or hard guardrails. As long as you stay within those hard guardrails of the law, then you should pursue your profit. The second describes more of a stakeholder approach, and a stakeholder is a broader circle of stakeholders. That could be anybody who's affected by the business. That does include shareholders, but also includes employees, communities, and even the environment. So it's a broader view of, a business and its purpose. And, that also, he alludes to a higher purpose, which I would say describes more like soft guardrails. So in addition to abiding by the laws and regulations, there are soft guardrails or norms, acceptable norms that people agree that even if it's legal, we might not do it. So the legal guardrails are not the only restraints that help guide a business activity. So you might be asking if I'm at the right, what does this have to do with renewable energy, and did I get the wrong memo or what? So I'd like to, explain why I'm covering this. I'm starting out this way because I think a lot of what we'll be covering in the next couple of hours has to do with the visible or physical infrastructure of our energy system, which is critical. But I think a critical point is that, if we're successful in making this transition, how we go about making the transition and how quickly largely depends on what I would call like an invisible infrastructure, the invisible infrastructure of our political economy. And how much these two very different business philosophies influence both, market developments and also policy developments. And while I framed, the question in a very binary way, choose this one or that one, I don't know if the assemblyman's still here, but I plan to say this. I think in reality, what's closest to reality is more of a spectrum, So these two different philosophies are kind of opposite ends of a spectrum. But if you really went through and you kind of plotted all the companies that are out there, both in terms of its guiding philosophy and how they actually behave in the marketplace, you could plot them along the spectrum in different ways. Our organization, the New Jersey Sustainable Business Council, we are a coalition of businesses that offer a different voice of business than what's often heard in Trenton and Washington, D.C. Our companies cluster closer to option B, which I'm happy to say. We're with our people here, because we believe more of a triple bottom line way of doing business versus a single bottom line. So a triple bottom line meaning people, planet, and profit, really balancing the need to be commercially successful, earn a profit, but do it in such a way that's responsible, socially and environmentally responsible. So I'd like to just kind of start my comments, or just kind of frame my perspective or what I have to offer based on the premise that transitioning to a clean and equitable energy economy is somewhat tied to also transitioning to a more evolved philosophy about the ultimate purpose of commerce, who it serves, how its benefits and costs are accounted for, and how they're distributed, and also who's involved in making those decisions in the first place. So thank you.
Thank you. That's helpful. Ms. Guran, I know you've had some words, but a few more would be okay.
Again, I'd like to echo the other panelists on thanking the organizers. Thanks for inviting and so for this great event and great topic. I'd like to draw your attention into the lights, electricity that is being used currently. Until this electricity comes to this room, it used a lot of water, considering that potentially is coming from, unfortunately, from fossil fuel and nuclear. Both fossil fuel and nuclear energy has a large water footprint. Please keep in mind, in addition to mitigating climate change, we have to consider conserving water. It's very important. So if we are getting the energy from the mix, and if it's coming from somewhere from Midwest or wherever, and it used a lot of coal or fossil fuel, and also nuclear, and it used a lot of water. In addition to carbon footprint of the fossil part, nuclear has a big water footprint. So talk about this water, or it comes to our showers or faucets. That water uses, until it reaches to our bottles or even this glass, uses a lot of energy. That means that water has a big energy footprint. Let's talk about the calories we're talking about. We said that energy has water footprint, water has energy footprint, but the calories we consume, it has both energy and water footprint. And currently, we are even, the food, until it reaches to our, kitchen table or plate, we waste 40% already. Why am I talking about this in a big context? Because we have to see the big picture first before we dive into the little solutions. Not the little, but big solutions, but the problem is even bigger. So, we're trying to create, we're at the crossroads that we have to change. We have to either go business as usual, transition certain parts, or we have to really, really transition ourselves for tomorrow. As you know, tomorrow around 2050, if not we're going to be 14 billion, we're going to be at least 9.5 billion. So food demand is going to increase, and then we will be living in large cities, especially central Jersey. By 2040 will be built out. That's going to impact our resources, including our food generation. So I'm wearing my teacher hat, and that's why I'm just, sustainability matter is really important while we're transitioning ourselves for tomorrow. It's really, really important because mitigating climate change, conserving water, and also closing circular low-carbon economy should be the goal for the state. So state, when, reducing greenhouse gases, achieving green energy, renewable energy, I should say it's better, and so we have to also consider that low-carbon circular economy with recovering every potential resources before even we waste. Currently, our waste disposal is linear. It starts, and then we throw everything into the final resting place. Why don't we close the loop instead, and why don't we create better, approaches? So that is why I'd like to draw your attention into that. And while we're trying to generate only energy, obviously, as I said, wind, solar, hydrothermal, geothermal, not the hydro, actually, small hydro maybe, geothermal, but sustainable biomass is really important. No bioenergy should follow food to fuel pathway. And also, it should be, definitely, we have to recycle the carbons above ground before we even consider digging further more carbons, please. So, we'll come to this matter, and only I just wanted to...
We'll keep working at that.
Thank you.
Mr. Fatton, may we hear from you, please?
Well, I'll echo what everybody else said, and thank you to the organizers, thank you to the League of Women Voters, and thank you to you all for being here this evening. And thank you for inviting me to be on a panel with these esteemed folks. I'm humbled to be here. So just to dive in a little bit on Jersey Renews, which Nancy mentioned in my bio, and Jim alluded to as well. So Jersey Renews is a coalition. We're now up to about 60 organizations, and we are pushing for action on climate on a state level. We want New Jersey to be a leader on addressing the climate crisis, because it is a crisis, as I think several of the speakers have iterated. This is a public health emergency, and so we need, especially when we think about what's going on in Washington, D.C., we need states like New Jersey to be in the lead and doing everything we can to address our energy sector, which is really the primary focus of tonight's event, but we also need to be thinking about, as the doctor just stated, in a holistic, big picture manner. So when we brought together this coalition of of Jersey Renews, it was not just to push for more clean energy. It's about thinking about greenhouse gas emissions, thinking about the economy-wide implications, and we have a series of strategies that we have basically invited people to endorse. There's 21 strategies which are available on the website, jerseyrenews.org. We have some flyers out in the front, jerseyrenews.org. And the interesting thing I think about Jersey Renews is that it's unlikely suspects, right? So many of us here, I think, could fall into the category of climate activists and people who would regularly sign a petition, regularly show up for a march. We're the folks who care about this issue and are going to be demanding action on climate because, we're here, frankly. But the thing about the coalition that Jersey Renews represents is that it's labor unions, it's faith leaders, it's community organizations, it's worker centers. So it's people who often are working on a whole host of other policy issues and other campaigns, but they're aligning behind a series of strategies for climate action. And so just to highlight a few things, I think they kind of fit into three buckets. Increasing clean energy is one, reducing greenhouse gases is two, and creating and sustaining good jobs is number three. So just to highlight a couple things, when we think about increasing clean energy, we've brought labor to the table because they agree that we want to increase offshore wind production and generation in this state. And we don't want to just install the wind turbines off the coast and generate the power. We also want to create the component parts. This is an opportunity for manufacturing. And the steelworkers, which is a traditional industrial union, is a member of our coalition, primarily, I think, because they care about offshore wind. We also want to increase solar energy, of course. And the other piece that I think deserves attention here is energy efficiency. So, the best way for us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, frankly, from the energy sector is to use less energy. So we should be doing everything we can, and we're focused on a state level, so we're looking at what are the regulations that could go into the building sector, into regulating appliances, et cetera. But it's also up to individuals to take action, right? So everybody hopefully is already changing light bulbs, unplugging things that don't need to be plugged in, et cetera. But there's an opportunity for the state to take action to make sure that, especially when we build new buildings, they're built to the highest standard, because energy efficiency is a key piece of the energy sector. But frankly, and we'll talk more about this, I think, during the question and answer period, is that and you saw from the chart in the movie, the energy sector is like 16% of our emissions in the state. So really what we need to be talking about is transportation. And the other piece that I wanted to highlight is our coalition is pushing hard for electric vehicle adoption. We want to see public charging infrastructure around the state, and electric vehicles should not be limited to those who are very affluent, right? We want to make sure that people who live in apartment buildings or other places where it's not easy to put a wall charger into your own home have an opportunity to transition into electric vehicles. We want those same folks who might be taking a cab or using a ride-sharing service to be able to get into an electric vehicle, and public charging infrastructure is one piece of the puzzle. The other piece about this is public transportation, and so yes, we want to continue to get more people to take transit. Frankly, we also want them to be walking and biking, but if they are taking public transit, if they're on a bus, we think it should be an electric bus. Right now, we have a pretty robust bus system. Actually, more people take buses than trains in New Jersey. It's a sort of misperception that more people take trains. But those buses are often spewing diesel. They're running on diesel, and they're spewing particulate matter through environmental justice communities and frankly all around the state. We think that they should be electric buses because it'll be better from an air pollution perspective, it'll reduce emissions, and it'll be a better riding experience for everyone, including the drivers. So the Amalgamated Transit Union is another one of our members. It's a labor union that represents the bus drivers, and they're greatly impacted by the air pollution that comes out of buses. And then I think I'm actually at 5 minutes, so I'll probably wrap it up there, but I would say that if you really want more information, if you want to sign the petition, it's at jerseyrenews.org.
Thank you. That's very important information.